Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more untold stories from behind Hollywood's biggest smiles. Some lives look loud and colorful from the outside, but the truth hiding underneath is often much quieter and far more painful. Jim Carrey's life is one of those stories. For decades, he made millions laugh with a level of energy that felt superhuman. His rubbery face, explosive movements, and fearless comedy convinced the world that he was endlessly joyful. But the truth is, that joy was built on survival. Behind every wild performance was a man carrying wounds that started long before fame, long before money, and long before anyone knew his name. Jim Carrey was born on January 17, 1962, in Newmarket, Ontario, into a family where laughter wasn't entertainment, it was protection. He was the youngest of 4 children, growing up in a household where dreams were fragile and security was never guaranteed. His father, Percy, once dreamed of being a musician, but life had other plans. He took a stable accounting job to support his family, believing consistency would keep them safe. For a while, it did. But when Jim was just 12 years old, that safety disappeared overnight. Percy lost his job, and with it, the foundation holding the family together completely collapsed. The loss of that job didn't just mean less money. It meant fear moved into their home. Bills stacked up faster than they could pay them, rejection letters replaced hope, and Percy's confidence slowly eroded. After applying to dozens of jobs without success, he was forced to take janitorial work for minimum pay. For a man who once dreamed big, the humiliation cut deep. Eventually, the family lost their house entirely. With nowhere else to go, they moved into a small yellow Volkswagen camper near Lake Ontario. Jim and his brother slept in a tent outside, even during freezing Canadian nights, waking up with frost clinging to their blankets. Those years changed Jim forever. Hunger, exhaustion, and instability became normal. After school, instead of homework or rest, Jim worked long shifts cleaning factory floors alongside his family. He washed up in gas station bathrooms and learned early that comfort was a luxury he couldn't afford. At school, he felt invisible and ashamed, wearing the same worn clothes while classmates whispered and laughed. But inside that frightened boy, something unusual was forming. Jim discovered that when he made people laugh, even for a moment, the fear loosened its grip. Comedy became the only place where pain couldn't reach him. At 13, Jim spent hours alone in front of a mirror, practicing facial expressions and voices. Not for attention, but for escape. Those faces distracted him from the stress, the hunger, and the crushing responsibility he felt far too young. His mother, Kathleen, struggled deeply with chronic illness and emotional instability. She was often bedridden and dependent on painkillers. Jim remembers sitting at the dinner table as she spoke casually about death, telling her children she might not be around much longer. For a child already surrounded by uncertainty, that fear settled into his bones and never truly left. Jim became withdrawn, anxious, and constantly afraid of losing the people he loved. At the same time, he learned how powerful laughter could be. At just 10 years old, he mailed a letter to Carol Burnett, hoping his impressions might someday open a door. When she sent a kind response back, Jim taped it to his wall like proof that escape was possible. But deep down, he wasn't chasing fame. He was running from despair. And that despair followed him into adulthood, no matter how far he traveled. By the time Jim reached his mid-teens, the pressure became unbearable. He was exhausted physically and emotionally. After long nights of labor, school felt impossible. At 16, he dropped out. His father cried but didn't stop him. Jim would later admit he wished Percy had fought harder, but he also understood that his father was broken too. Around this time, comedy stopped being a dream and became a lifeline. His first real performance came at a Toronto comedy club, where his father arranged an opportunity. Dressed in a stiff suit, Jim bombed. The audience booed him off stage. That humiliation could have ended everything, but instead it hardened him. 2 years later, he returned, stripped of pretense, performing raw, wild, and unfiltered. This time, the audience laughed. At 19, with barely $200 to his name, Jim moved to Los Angeles. He slept on couches, ate whatever he could find, and performed anywhere that would let him speak. At night, he visualized success, not because he wanted fame, but because he wanted safety. Hollywood rejected him repeatedly, including multiple failed Saturday Night Live auditions. But rejection was familiar. He had grown up with it. When Jim finally found his breakthrough on In Living Color, success didn't arrive gently. It exploded. His characters were extreme, unpredictable, and unforgettable. What audiences didn't see was the cost. Jim pushed his body beyond limits, constantly bruised, exhausted, and mentally stretched thin. Fame magnified everything. Drugs entered his life as coping mechanisms. Then 1994 changed everything. 3 massive hits in 1 year turned him into a global superstar. Money poured in. Attention became suffocating. His marriage collapsed. The boy who once dreamed of security now felt more out of control than ever. As his career soared, his personal life unraveled. He lost both parents during the height of his success. Writing a massive check for his father's funeral felt symbolic, but it didn't heal the loss. Relationships followed a painful pattern of closeness and retreat. Then came the devastating loss of Catriona White. The lawsuits, public scrutiny, and guilt reopened every childhood wound he'd ever buried. Depression, which had followed him since the 1980s, grew heavier. Medication numbed him, but also drained life of meaning. Jim questioned identity itself. After fully immersing himself into Andy Kaufman during Man on the Moon, he struggled to return. He began asking who he really was beneath the performance. When he said the self doesn't exist, people laughed or mocked him. But he wasn't joking. Painting and meditation became his refuge. Stepping away from Hollywood wasn't rejection. It was survival. By 61, Jim finally spoke openly. Not for headlines, not for sympathy, but for truth. He admitted the laughter was armor, that the man who made the world laugh had been fighting himself for decades. And in finally telling that truth, he found something rare: peace. After hearing Jim Carrey's story, what part surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more hidden stories behind Hollywood's biggest icons.